Well, I want to start out this video by saying the M16 round is actually more lethal than the AK47, but I want to tell you this. Any round is lethal. A 22 long rifle, even at 100 yards, is lethal. It's like, it gets into nitpicky bullshit, if you want to put it that way. You know, what's more lethal than another, but there's a reason why they decided upon the 5.56 by 45 for NATO. And there's other disadvantages though to it. The one is it doesn't punch through things as well as the AK-47 round. So for instance, here's like an AK-47 round. This is a steel jacketed round. These are cheap to fire because they're steel jacketed. Now if you reload, actually the 5.56 is cheaper to fire if you're using reloadable brass, because the projectiles are cheaper, you know, if you're just shooting a lot. Now the reason the 5.56 is actually more lethal than on a human target than an AK-47, not to say that there's not a major difference, but you can see the difference in size of these two cartridges and weight difference. That's the real big difference. And the Russians did go to the AK-74, the 5.45 by 39 millimeter, the same length, but a much smaller diameter, higher velocity cartridge in the AK-74. And that turned out to be inferior to the M16 round. Now, I'm going to tell you why this. I know there's all these statistics out there about energy, muzzle energy, velocity, and all this stuff. And when you look at this round, the 5.56, hit a brick or wood or steel. This, the AK-47 round, has more punch-through power. That's where, if you're going to use this in a real-life situation, the AK-47 round could be pretty good. Could be an advantage, because you know, you got cover and concealment. Somebody's got behind cover, right? Cover, where in other words, small arms fire. Now, if you're firing an AK-47, it's got a better chance of punching through that cover, and it also has a better chance of not being deflected by brush and trees firing through, you know, vegetation. But the reason the 5.56 is more, you know, and I don't want to say like one's not lethal and the other's not lethal. I'm not saying that. That's getting so stupid. But just want to tell people this, why they chose this, because some people are thinking it's like a puny round and all this kind of garbage. It's really, the key is the velocity. You know, they actually found out about this in World War I, and World War I was like when the first high velocity ammunition was really started to be used on a mass scale, and soldiers were coming in with these wounds, and they're like saying, you know, the doctor be looking at something over here where there's an entrance wound, and all around here was dead tissue, right? And they'd be saying, what the hell's going on? What is the enemy using poison bullets? Now, what was going on is, it's called hydrostatic shock, or maybe that's not the new term for it, but that's the term I was taught with it. What happens is, the bullet is so fast that the cells rupture around the actual physical wound. Now, I know there's other things going on with the M16 cartridge, whereby it has a little bit of a wobble. It starts getting in flight, the projectile, a little bit of a wobble, so when it hits, it tumbles and it takes off a different direction, it fragments. There's other things that go on, but the velocity is a lot of why it kills. It's not just translating to velocity and mass equals muzzle equals energy. It's also velocity also equates to cellular rupture. The cells rupture around wherever it hits. When they were developing the advanced combat rifle of the 1990s, they were also trying to looking into an 11 caliber, actually. 11 caliber. You know, this is like a 22 caliber, right? So 5.56. They were looking at like an 11 caliber going at 5,000 feet per second. The theory was that, I don't know if that would have took, you know, went all the way through to final stages. But the reason they stopped all this development of the advanced combat rifle in the 1990s was the Cold War ended. But supposedly, right? That's another thing. But the thing is, the 11 caliber at 5,000 feet was going so fast that any torso shot theoretically would cause brain death from shock. So velocity, velocity and mass equals the total energy, but velocity on a living organism, it's not the energy exactly that's equating to how well it works against the enemy. It is the shock value when it goes through living tissue. It explodes all the cells around it. And the magic velocity, if you want to use that magic cutoff specification, I mean, it's like when you're talking, it's almost like talking shop in a way. But I just want to get this clear to people, because when they fire a AK47 round and they fire a M16 round, they say, "Oh, this one's got more punch. It's got a bigger hole. I could see it blowing up bricks more. It looks like it's more destructive." Yeah, it is, and it's got more energy. I think it's a 123 projectile. The M16 A1 round was a 55. There's a 55 grain projectile. There's a 62 grain, a 68 grain. NATO, right? The with the A2 and A3. But it's got the AK-47 round has more energy, but the velocity on actual living tissue of being over 2,000 feet per second, that also comes into play, because it does, I got to repeat that again, it causes the cells to rupture. Also, it creates an excavating wound. It causes more tissue to fly out the back. It's like it creates a vacuum. It goes so fast that it just pulls stuff out. Gross. Okay, that's what it does. It's actually, the wounds are nastier with an M6. Not to say that anything is, it's like, a 380 pistol isn't going anywhere near 2,000 feet per second, right? It's going to do the job, no problem, right? Even at 100 yards, right? But the difference, though, is at 2,000 feet per second. So, like with a AK-47 round, the 2,000 feet, it comes out of the muzzle theoretically 2,300 feet per second, right? And I'm doing this right off of memory, so whatever, It's like, I used to know this inside out. It's 2,300 feet per second on this AK-47 round. But when it gets out to even 100 yards, it's already getting below the 2,000 feet per second. Now, that's not to say it's not lethal, because all pistol ammunition isn't way under 2,000 feet per second, Your 357, even your 357 Magnums, it's like half that, right? So, but that doesn't have that extra hydrostatic shock where the cells all around where it hits actually explode. Like, in other words, the doctors would see damage, and then days later they would see all this tissue all the way around here is all dead. That's due to the velocity. The initial damage is not apparent to what really is dead. It's at 2,000 feet per second. So this one gets under 2,000 feet per second pretty quick. And at 2,300 feet per second at the muzzle is sometimes exaggerated. Sometimes it's just over 2,000 feet per second at the muzzle with the AK-47 round. Depends on who the hell's making the stuff, because what's advertised and what's really happens is something else. The NATO stuff seems to be legit. The original A1 round was about a little over 3,200 feet per second at the muzzle. The A2 round is 3,000 feet at the muzzle. At 200 yards, it's still going over 2,000 feet per second. So it's got that hydrostatic value, that hydrostatic shock value, whereby it's going to create rupturing of the cells. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's going to be cellular rupture even at lower velocity ammunition, but when it gets over it's like that's around a cutoff number, 2,000 feet per second. When it gets over 2,000 feet per second, it creates more rupture in living organism of the cells. And so the M16 round on the A2 will stay over 2,000 feet per second up to 200 yards, no problem. Now, the AK47, maybe 50 yards. Now, what they really ought to be doing, I know it would be best, if you really want to talk like what's the best, what's got the real good punch-through power, just the 30-06, like they used in World War II and World War I, right? But it's a heavy round. So, if people went to smaller rounds, right? I mean, you can only carry so much garbage. Now, I know the different platforms too. If you wanted to say that, I'm not going to pull out any guns here or anything like this on a Jeep hood here, but if you have, the M16 is more accurate than the AK47. I think AK47 can handle dirt better. I think the AR15 platform is better because it's more versatile. For one, you can adapt it. It's more parts availability for one. That's another thing. But if you really want the ultimate weapon, I would say the Grendel, the 6.5 Grendel. This is a Grendel magazine loaded up with 25 rounds, and these are brass. This is brass ammunition. You can reload. These Grendels will go, uses like, I think it's a 123 projectile, just like the AK-47 round, but it's a little smaller, right? It's a little smaller, but it's got a lot more energy. It's got a lot more energy, but then again, the Grendel round will be over 2,000 feet per second out, even to 350 yards. And it just flies through the air much better. Even at over 300 yards, it's actually got more power than the old NATO rounds, like the 30-06, they would use, or the 7.62 by 51 millimeter, because of the flight characteristics of the projectile, the 6.5 projectile. 6.5 projectile is freaking great. It's the 6.5 Swedish round, and it's a great hunting round. Now, as far as hunting goes, you don't really hunt with a, well, I guess you could, you really don't hunt with an AR15 round or an AK-47, but you definitely could with a Grendel round. Now, if you was going to say what's the ultimate platform, it would be the Grendel. And the beauty of having an AR-15 though is you can just buy an upper for a Grendel, and you got two rifles in one. And a Grendel is vastly superior to AK-47, vastly. Far more punch-through power on bricks, and far more power going through wood, metal, you name it, steel, and it's got more shock value on living targets. I guess as far as the best system, probably be the Israelis. Their new bullpup designs are probably the best ones going. I think they're the best deal in town. If they ever made something like that in a Grendel, and that was adopted by the NATO across the board, that would be the ultimate weapon. But a lot of times, you're choosing a weapon, you always want something that's extremely common, and when the military adopts it, it automatically becomes very common. So that's my beef on that. But actually, the 5.56, it's like, if I say one's more lethal than the other, it is more lethal than the AK-47 in that, well, it's on human tissue. But that's not to say the AK-47, it's not like that much more, but you got more lethality in a smaller package. That's really what it is. But in practical world, if most people are behind brush, they're behind cover, the AK-47 is going to punch through that cover. I'm not talking about concealment, I'm talking about cover, whereby it's supposed to stop small arms fire. So, but that magic 2,000 feet per second is not that. Now with this, I forgot what the hell this is on the 30-06. This thing will be flying out there pretty far with over 2,000 feet per second, probably a good few hundred yards. But then again, the Grendel does that too, no problem, because of the projectile characteristics. The 6.5 Grendel is a long bullet compared to the diameter. Somehow it slices through the air good, and it's got more lethality even in the 30-06 or the 7.62 by 51 NATO at 300 yards, because this 30 cal slows down a lot more. It just doesn't fly through the air as well as the 6.5, because the way this is the diameter to the length of the bullet. And that could definitely be said about the AK-47 too. It's not shit. I mean, it's not like one's shit and one's good. I'm not saying that, but people are like downgrading these 5.56, saying, this is a puny little round. Oh, this is nothing. They look at this one and they say, this one's bigger. This one's got to be better. This one makes a bigger hull. You fire it at a steel plate, you fire it at bricks. It does do more damage. But if you look at what happens to the human, well, they both screw up the human body, but this one's deceptive because the shock value where it explodes the cells in the human body, it's not apparent till later. It looks like undamaged tissue, but all that tissue where it went through is damaged all around here. You'll see the physical damage, but all these cells all around here are dead, because if it's going over 2,000 feet per second, it creates a shock. Now, if our body didn't have all cells in it, we were one big cell, it would just blow us up like a freaking balloon, But that's what they are. All human cells are like little tiny balloons. It goes through it so fast that it blows up a lot of these balloons inches away from where the damage is, and that it's about a 2,000 foot per second cutoff. But this the M16 will go 2,000 feet per second, past good 200 yards. The Grendel will go 2,000 feet per second with a lot more energy and a bigger hole, 350 yards, no problem. The AK, 75 yards. Or sometimes it's barely going 2,000 feet right out of the muzzle, because a lot of this stuff, that's this steel jacketed stuff, is, not saying it's not lethal, okay? For crying out loud, it's very lethal. What I'm saying is that, when people are telling me the AK-47 is vastly superior to this, no way in hell. It's I know there's pluses and minuses. It'll punch through, it's not going to go through this. The 5.6 is not, well, it'll go through that, no problem. But the AK-47 will knock out this wood a lot easier than this 5.56. 5.56 will go right through that, though, no problem. But the difference is on human living tissue, and a lot of people just don't understand that. Just want to leave you with this note. I shouldn't even say this, because I don't know if YouTube will say it's advertiser unfriendly or some garbage. But if you look at an example of when JFK was killed, the type of wound he had was an excavating wound. He was definitely not shot with a 6.5 Italian Caranco. No way. It wasn't the 8mm Mauser they found. It was actually a round that was faster than the M16. It was a 220 Swift or a 22-250. It was an ultra high velocity round because of the type of wound it had. And that's the other thing. Besides the hydrostatic shock, it's got it's an excavating wound. It pulls stuff out, right? That's what happens. So that's why this little round is far more lethal than you think it is. And that is why, the proof of it, if you don't believe it, if you really don't believe it, I don't have one of those AK-74 rounds, the 5.45 by 39 millimeter. It's the same length as this. It's a little skinnier caliber than the M16 round, and that was the Russian AK-74 that was replacing the AK-47. And the ballistics are actually inferior to the M16 round, but they were trying to copy, what I'm trying to say is they were trying to copy what NATO was doing. You know? I mean, so the proof is right there. The fact that they were copying or attempting to copy what NATO's doing. Because the velocity is not, you know, I know you see the velocity, the diameter, the weight of the bullet, the size of the hole, oh, yeah, I know, all that stuff, but it's that hydrostatic shock and the excavating wound that it makes is really why the M16 round is actually, generally speaking, more lethal than a AK-47. Either one is very lethal, though. I mean, so, you know, for those people out there in La La Land that keep telling me that these things are puny or no good, well, you're just going to have to argue with all the militaries in the world that use it. You know, I mean, yeah, I mean, and look at how many militaries in the world adopted the AK-74, which is closer to this versus this. And if you want to make a bigger hole and you want to have, you know, more power, more energy, and, you know, weight, carrying the weight is not an issue, just get a 30-06. 30-06 is probably the most versatile. Well, maybe that, or I guess an 8mm Mauser would be another good one, or 7mm Mauser. But it's, you know, as far as like the, you know, higher capacity magazines, well, like I said, repeating it again, but the Grendel would be the one to have. The Grendel, probably in that Israeli, they don't make it yet though. That would be the ultimate weapon. But you can get this in the AR platform, the Grendel with the 6.5. So they're those are the facts though, and I've been around the block a bunch of times, so I know what I'm talking about, and I know that what people see when they're firing on a range and they're blowing up, you're hitting metal plates and they're blowing up cinder blocks, the AK-47 does look more impressive, definitely. And that is an advantage in real life because people don't necessarily stand out in the open. They also wear body armor. They also, you know, there's brush in a way. They're standing behind, you know, a car or something, whatever, you know, the truck, whatever they're behind, you know, car, truck, Jeep, whatever, right? So you want that ability to punch through. But even so, even at that, this round will work like a drill bit pretty well because of you know, it's a smaller, skinnier projectile. If it's close up, it's overstabilized, works like a drill bit, punches through steel pretty well. So, but it's not shit, and it's actually, if you took which one is actually more lethal on a human tissue, I know it's like, you know, both very lethal. This one, the M16 round, is more lethal than the AK-47 round, no doubt about it. And that has to do with velocity, and that velocity is not talking about just muzzle energy and all that garbage, or energy, you know, out at 200 yards, and then how much of an impact it's going to make. It has to do with that velocity rupturing cells, and it has to be how far out that round will do 2,000 feet per second. Many cases, this steel ammo that's supposed to be 2,300 feet per second out the muzzle, it's about 2,000 feet per second right out the muzzle. It's already below that 2,000 feet per second. That creates, as soon as it gets out a little bit, and that's not saying it's weak, for crying out loud. I mean, I could tell you, like, because I don't want to get into an argument like that, because it's a pistol might be going 900 feet per second, and it's totally lethal at 200 meters, no problem. So I mean, but as far as that hydrostatic shock, that's what really makes this lethal. 2,000 feet per second out to over 200 yards, and in the case of Grendel, over 350 yards, over 2,000 feet per second. That's what's doing it. Don't look at those specifications so much as energy. It's on human tissue. That 2,000 feet per second is a rough threshold where it creates a lot of cellular rupture. And the faster you're going over that, the more cellular rupture. If you can make something really, like this, I told you even back before, I just got to repeat it again because sometimes people aren't getting it. If you had the theorized one they were going to make possibly for in an advanced combat rifle of the 1990s, that 11 caliber going at 5,000 feet per second, it was such a shock that any torso shot would have caused instant brain death. So you'd have to be a very determined enemy to go up against somebody. If even you got hit anywhere, you'd be dead for sure. It's like survivability rate would really suck, and that's so because it's 5,000 feet per second. So anyway, just want to put this out here because I mean I see a lot of videos on people hitting steel plates and blowing up bricks and telling me this and that and whatever. Yeah, I know that. I know what it does. I'm aware of it. So I mean I fired literally tens and tens and tens of thousands of rounds. I got loading ammo all over the place, loads of it.